Hello everyone and welcome to another Scotch Whay podcast, and this is a Glasgow Film Festival special because we're going to talk to the director of Scotch, the Golden Dram, Andrew Peat. Hello Andrew.
Hello Alistair, nice to see you and good to be here.
Now you were just saying before we go any further that this film has two names depending on where it's playing.
Right, in the UK and Ireland it's the title of Scotch, the Golden Dram, as you just said, but internationally it's Scotch, a Golden Dream.
I think this is interesting, and we'll come on to talk about it later, because there's no doubt that Scotch, or the whisky industry, has gone global, to use a term that someone else used once. So tell us a little bit about, because I haven't seen the film yet, I'm seeing it tonight, I'm very much looking forward to it, but why this film, why have you decided to make this film?
This goes back a little bit. Do you want to how I got into whiskey myself, or just the film?
You can do whatever you like.
Okay.
There's no, yeah.
My background is this. My grandfather was Glaswegian.
Uh-huh.
He emigrated to the United States. And so in my family, of course, we always had this connection with Scotland. And I still have relatives here who I visit whenever I come over. And I came as an exchange fellow for 1 year at the University of St. Andrews.
All right.
And I loved my time there. Really enjoyed. I still have still in communication. For example, one of my professors, he's going to come and see the film next week when it plays again in Glasgow here. Then later on, many years later, I went to graduate film school, and I went to the University of Southern California School of Film and TV. And it's a 3-year program. And at the end of the program, we have to take what's called industry course. So it's a course that prepares you for the professional world. And I took the course pitch. It's called the pitch class, and we just learn how to pitch to studio executives and stuff. And each of us has to prepare several pitches. And it's common to pitch big projects, because that's what Marvel films, Disney, that sort of thing. But I wanted to have at least one of my pitches a film that I could truly realistically make, not a pie in the sky type of thing. And so for me, I'd already done some short documentaries, and I thought, well, a documentary is easier, it's a smaller team, it's a lower budget, it's much more reachable. So I began considering various possibilities for a documentary, and I remembered that when I came to Scotland, my year there, I'd never really had Scotch whiskey before, but I was here and I said, this is the land of whiskey.
Yeah.
So I went into a liquor store and I said, hi, I'm this American student, don't know anything about whiskey, what do you suggest? I want to learn something. And so he suggested that I get a half bottle, like the 37 centiliter bottle of Glenmorangie 10-year-old single malt.
Right.
And it came in this beautiful little like a tin box.
Yeah.
It's printed like a 2-color tone printing. And I still have that box to today. It's in my home, it's on my shelf, and I always look at that. And so when I was considering what film to do, I thought, I wanted to research a little bit about whiskey and what was available already. I found one film that is much older and is a very sort of simple, dry documentary about the making of whiskey and a little bit about the history. And so I thought, well, there's nothing really there that will catch people's interest. And so I thought, well, here's this is a real possibility. And so I prepared my pitch, did it. The professors really liked it. They said, you should really think about making this.
Wow.
And so that's when I, considered, can I do this? After graduation, a few months passed. Before I graduated, I spoke with one of my classmates. He's an Indian. His name is Arjun, and he was a cinematographer, has a wonderful eye for capturing unique pictures. And I talked with him and said, look, I'm thinking about making this film about Scotch whiskey. Would you be interested in joining and being part of the team? And he said, sure, why not? And so it was around December of 2014.
Right.
And I sort of said, well, am I going to do it or not? And he said, I think I'm going to do this. So I contacted Arjun again. I said, look, I think we're going to do this. Are you in? And he said, okay. And then I started putting together the rest of the team and really did the pre-production work, which is investigating, searching, what is whiskey, how is it made, what are the big distilleries, who are the big names, who are the organizations that are connected to it. For example, the Scotch Whisky Association.
Yeah.
Other aspects, because my concept was to take the story, in essence, from beginning to end, and I call it from barley to bottle.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was even a matter of contacting, farmers, barley farmers. One of the interesting characters in the film is the Glass Storm, which is the company that makes extremely high-end whiskey bottles for like the 50-year-old.
Oh, right.
The special edition. So that their bottom price is for their whiskeys. The bottles of whiskey are like 10,000 pounds, and then go up from there. And so they agreed to be in the film. And we spent half a day or so just at Glass Storm filming them, making glass, and interviewing them as well. And so it was a matter of trying to get all these different aspects of the whole process together. And so you asked me, how did this film come about? That's sort of, there are several strands that link together.
But what was it about that half bottle of Glenmorangie, which is still certain thing that kind of captured you? I mean, what was it about the drink itself, I guess?
Previously I didn't drink any hard liquor. So growing up in Northern California, my mother worked for wineries. And so I grew up more with wine and beer. And so when I came to Scotland, it was a matter of saying, okay, I'm going to try this out.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I mean, of course, the first time I tasted it, it's very strong. Yeah. And it's strong to the point, the first time you don't even really taste it.
Yes.
But after a while, what I did is I used the cap of the bottle as my little cup. So I fill the cap every night. And just night by night, I just slowly sip that.
Yeah.
And then after a number of days, you start appreciating the flavor, the aromas. You start pulling out, hints of the fruitiness or the flower. And so slowly I grew to appreciate that.
Yeah.
And then after a while, then I tried some other whiskeys, and over the years, it was just a matter of that, just trying a few different whiskeys and slowly enjoying it over time. And actually, by making the film, I really learned, of course, about whiskey and about how to appreciate it, how to nose it, and do these things. And all that is covered in the film. Because
it's a drink which, in this country, and I think around the world, has gone such a metamorphosis in terms of reputation. I remember my mum always tells a story about when they had a bottle of whiskey in the house. It lasted all year, and it was like brought out for special occasions, it cost a huge amount of money as well in terms of the working man's wage. In the pubs, certainly of Glasgow, and I'm guessing many other cities in Scotland, the idea of having a half and a half, and it just it could be whatever whiskey they had there, and you would have whatever. But over the years, it's just become this mega industry that sometimes it's difficult to get your head round, and I think it's interesting you making it coming from America. I think that'll give it a different perspective than someone who's maybe it's like back in the middle of it here would do. What is the perception in America of whiskey as a drink? Is it one of those kind of Scottish totems, like Tarleton, haggis, whiskey?
In some sense, yes. I would say in some sense, yes, because then I believe that the statistic is that there are more people of Scottish descent in America than in Scotland.
I've heard that, yes.
Right. And so even, for example, it was interesting is that near my home, they have the largest, what do we call it, the Scottish Highland Games.
All right.
In the world.
Yeah.
And it's
world.
Right, it's right near my home, and over 100,000 people participate every year. So it's gigantic, and that was something that I grew up with because it just happened to be near my home. And so I went there several times, and you see, the caber toss, and the hammer toss, and all these giant men, tossing things back and forth, and of course the dancing and everything. So there is actually significant, say, aspects of Scottish culture and history that are in America, simply because of the descendants who keep them alive. And so, I did grow up with that. And Scotch whiskey is part of that, I think. And I think also and this is something we do touch on in the film, is that there's a sort of iconic nature to Scotch whiskey that you see in Hollywood films, in TV, and you'll see whenever somebody wants to order something that's very special, again, higher class, they'll say, "Give me a Scotch." Or they'll say, "Oh, this is a 30-year-old bottle of blah blah blah," and there's emphasis there. There's gravitas. And you don't see that with any other drink. No.
I mean, maybe champagne might be the kind of closest relationship.
And so it's something that is special.
I mean, I think in Scotland particularly, there's this kind of emotional connection to it as a drink, kind of a defining drink, if you like. And from what I've seen from the trailer of your film, there's an emotional story at the heart of that, particularly surrounding the Bruichladdich distillery.
Right.
So could you say a little bit about that?
Right. This is serendipity. In the sense of when I was contacting all of the master distillers and blenders and the distilleries and these, I didn't know exactly who they were. I mean, I could check a little bit online who they were, and I knew that these were people, veterans of the industry. I wanted to really focus on people who had been making whiskey for more than 10 years. I mean, that'd be like a minimum bar. And so I was really looking for experienced people, and one of them was Jim McEwen, and so part of it was I was trying to contact many of these distilleries and distillers and see who would be willing to be a part of the film, because I knew I was a no-name, right? I contact them and they don't know who I am, and so some of them might just say, no thanks. But the ones who said yes, then we arranged for the meetings, interviews. And Jim was very welcoming, and he really opened up to us. He gave us the opportunity to film the whole process at Bruichladdich. He allowed us to film his family. We filmed his daughters and his grandchildren playing on the beach and things like this. And so he really allowed us to get a wonderful look into his life. Now, the serendipity part is this. When I went, I had no idea that Jim was such a big name in the field. He was, this figure.
They call him the Whisky Man, don't they? That's it, the Whisky Man of Islay.
And the other thing is that I had no idea that he was retiring, and we just happened to arrive the week of his retirement.
Oh wow!
And he was like one day he said to us, because we were with him about 4 days on and off filming, and he said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to have the last tasting of my life. I'm going to film. We're going to do that tomorrow." He had a group of Central and South American distributors who had flown over and were doing some learning and tasting and all that. And he said, "This is the last one I'm going to do in my life. Would you like to film it?" Of course. And the same thing. Just a couple of weeks earlier, his whiskey called Black Art had just been named the best single malt in the world. This is just like stars, crossing paths in the sky type of thing. That it was just an amazing thing that we just walked into. And I had no idea when we came over that was the situation. So it was after these events and the amount of access that he gave us that we knew when we left Islay, because we started off in Islay, and then we went and filmed in many other distilleries around Scotland. But when we left Islay, we had the film team. We had a sense that Jim is definitely if he's not the main character, he's one of the main characters, and because we didn't know who else we were running into and what other experiences and what other films we get. And then it just turned out that because of the footage, he ended up being sort of the main character, and there are other major characters in the film. But it was just it was easy because of his situation and the access. It was easy to mold the film so that he becomes the central character. But
Islay itself, it seems to me, is almost like no pun intended, the spiritual home of whiskey, because there's multiple distilleries there. It has gone through bad times and is now having good times, with the resurgence of whiskey around the world, but particularly those distilleries. And because I think Bruichladdich had closed down, didn't it?
It had been closed for many years. It actually had been closed 3 times previously. And so that's part of the film, is talking about the history that it had been open, it was closed, it was open, it was closed, it was open, closed, and all these workers had been laid off and brought back, laid off and brought back, and so it was difficult for them to believe that it would really rise again.
And it really has risen
Well,
again.
it has. It's grown. It's much stronger than it ever was in the past.
Yeah, because I know Argyll a little bit, kind of Crinan and area, things like that, and I know how big Brewer has become in terms of a kind of local success story and a global success story as well. I mean, they've got these now, the way that they're marketed is top range.
Even in Taiwan, when I'm at a little airport, I can see in the duty-free shop Bruichladdich.
Yeah.
Who could imagine that, a few years ago?
And they now, I know they started doing their own gin and they're doing their own vodka, and that's one of the things about the resurgence of whiskey is also it's given a lot of other drinks a bit of a shot in the arm, because the other distillery. Do you go to have you been to the Glasgow distillery, which is there's one which is opening down on the Clyde? No. So I think it's not making whiskey yet, so you probably wouldn't.
No.
But I do know that they've started, because whiskey is something that takes a period of time, obviously, to ground,
minimum 3 years and 1 day.
Yeah, there you go. You know it well. But other drinks like vodka and whiskey, you can start making almost straight away.
Oh yeah, even Bruichladdich, when they first started, they needed income because they're going to start making whiskey, but you can't sell it.
Yeah.
So they began with gin.
Yeah.
So they had their own gin. It was a botanical gin that was made with a number of the plants and flowers from Ireland. And that became very successful.
Hugely successful. Yeah. I know. I mean, I know it's very popular high-end gin in some of the bars in Scotland. So, were you surprised by making film? Was there anything that really kind of I never would have thought of that, or this is much bigger than I thought, or stories that were told?
There were several things. Yeah. I mean, I'd say they were all happy surprises.
Yeah.
Right. And we got so many good interviews. And the sad thing is that the final film, the final cut, is only around 2% of what we filmed. 98% is on the cutting room floor because we just had to keep cutting down to make the story. And that's one of the things that the audiences who watched it have said, that they enjoy it so much. It makes them laugh, it makes them cry. So it's a very emotional story. People really get into the characters. But it moves. That's one of the things because people have come to me and said, they thought that most of documentaries are kind of slow and boring and tend to be like one subject or a political situation.
Sure.
And they said this is such a different documentary than that, and it just because it keeps moving and it doesn't really slow down. It goes from one to another, and hopefully it keeps the audience's interest, and that's one of the factors that makes it really enjoyable. But the things that surprised me, I would say, are in a really good way, of course, is the passion that these people have for their product and the desire to constantly perfect it. Always working to make the best possible thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why Scotch whiskey is so well known around the world and highly respected, because it's good.
Yeah.
It's always good.
Yeah.
It may not be the particular one that you like, the flavor that you like, the expression that you like, but it's always going to be very good. That was one thing. Another thing that surprised me is that these companies, in essence, they're competing with each other, right?
Yeah.
But the people I talked with, they always only had positive things to say about each other.
That's interesting.
They've never cut each other down.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of like an unspoken rule among them that they support each other to support Scotch as a global.
Yeah, we're all in this together,
brand, right?
And it helps each of us which is really refreshing. Yeah. And it's interesting. Usually, that's the kind of relationship that you get in much smaller industries. But to hear it about such a huge industry is really interesting. Yeah. And that's one of the other things to mention is that it now is. There's a play that was taught in schools over here called The Sheep, the Stag and the Black Oil, and it goes back to these industries which really kept Scotland going. You had the sheep, you had the hunting and shooting and fishing, and then you obviously had the oil, and almost like the fourth part of that is the Golden Dram, if you like. It's the whiskey industry, because it's just been this global success financially.
And I think at this point, whiskey is probably bigger than the others.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's now sold in some 200 countries. I mean, how many countries are there in the world? 220 or something, and so they're sold in something like 200 countries. It's well over $6 billion a year. I don't think the sheep do that.
So, how long has the film been out? I mean, it's been to festivals already, hasn't it?
Right.
So, tell us a little bit about the reception it's had.
The world premiere was at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and that was a year ago. I mean, almost exactly a year ago. And so we had a fantastic reception there. And the audiences really loved it. And as a matter of fact, what happened, because that's an industry area, it's just north of Hollywood.
Right.
And so a lot of industry people tend to go to these.
Okay.
And immediately after that showing, I had sales agents, distribution companies come to me and say, we want to represent the film, which was fantastic, because then we had to choose, which one do we want to go with. So then we chose one that we felt would give us the best opportunities. And we've been to, before this, we've been to a total of maybe 12 festivals in the United States, Canada, Buenos Aires, Argentina, which
fantastic.
is a giant festival there. And so the festival runs, the reactions have all been the same. People really like it, they love it. They contact us through the website saying, how can we get a DVD? When can we see it again? This sort of thing. When will it be distributed in our country? So that's all been really good. And it's just started the theater run in Australia and New Zealand. That was about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then here, of course, we're doing the festival, and then March 8th, next Friday, it will open wide. So it's going to go across the UK and Ireland.
Oh, fantastic.
And I'll be giving you the website
Yeah.
for the list of all the theaters, and that's an ongoing one, because we, every week we add in more theaters and more showing times. So that will list them all, so people can find a theater near them if they want to go and see the film.
We'll certainly link to that on the website as well. And what's the reaction been like? I mean, in terms of what have people said that they really enjoy about it? Because you mentioned just earlier that people that aren't particularly into whiskey have really enjoyed the film.
Right. Well, because again, the original concept was barley to bottle.
Yeah.
But I knew from the beginning that really good films are crafted around characters.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have, the amazing thing is that within the whiskey world, there's so many interesting characters.
I'll bet, I was thinking.
And so, as I was saying, so many of these interviews are interesting, and we had to cut out 98% of the film because simply for length, right? And that was not easy. We had, I've got this wonderful interview, this great story. Well, I can't have it in because if we put everything in, who wants to sit and watch a 10-hour movie?
No, that is true. That is true.
So that was,
that's the director's cut, is it?
Right. So we've got all these great stories, and that's what people really identify with. So even, as I said, there were many people who don't necessarily like whiskey, and they've talked to me and said, I don't like whiskey, but it's a great movie because these people are so interesting, and the stories they have to tell are so interesting and funny, and I think they really see the passion that these people have for their craft, whether it's the farmer growing the best barley, whether it's the distiller making the best whiskey, the people who handle the wood, right, the barrels, or as we said, the glass storm with their perfect glass. And they even talk about if there's a slight flaw in the bottle, they destroy it. And I would say, well, if there's a slight flaw, I can take one back to Taiwan with me. Is that okay? And they're no, it's a strict rule. Any flaw, immediately destroyed.
See, I'd never thought that the higher, most expensive whiskies were getting better quality bottles. But,
absolutely. And so that was one thing that we learned that I didn't know about before. And it's just, everything has to be perfect.
Yeah.
There can't be any flaw.
It seems to me that most people enjoy watching people that have passion, knowledge, and skill. Their skill, almost doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
If someone does something well and loves doing it, then there's something really kind of engaging about that.
One of the films that really inspired me to do this was a film that I saw. It was made 5-6 years ago, maybe, called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you know that.
Yes.
About the sushi pastor in
I
Tokyo.
do remember that, yeah.
And again, there's this old man, and what does he do? Every day he goes in and he makes the best sushi. Every day goes in, makes exactly the same, the best sushi, you know, and he's been perfecting it over decades, right?
Yeah.
And then he teaches his sons to do the same thing, and that sort of, you know, dedication, discipline, and passion it's inspiring.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you have no interest in sushi. Right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
And so we found the same thing for Scotch, was that these people have that discipline and love for what they're doing.
And I might be wrong about this, but it seems that documentary making at the moment is in a kind of golden period. There's a lot of really interesting documentaries being made and actually shown at film festivals like this one.
Right.
What's your experience of it?
That's my training at the USC Film School. I did we were doing documentary and narrative, but I did a lot of documentary work there. And then getting out and being able to do it now, it's very exciting. And I do believe, as you mentioned, is that right now is kind of a golden era for documentary filmmaking, because there's a great variety available, all kinds of topics. And I think one of the things that's really helped out are the digital platforms, like Netflix, Amazon, these platforms which allow people to easily access documentary films. Because in the past, I mean, even now, even with our film, but in the past, you know, if the majority of documentary films never get to see the theater, right? I mean, when's the last time your average person you say, someone who's gone last month, they watched the latest Marvel film, and the month before that they saw a Disney film, and the month okay. And you ask that person, when's the last time you saw a documentary in the theater? It's, 10 years ago or something.
Michael Moore or something like that,
and so it's rare for a documentary to really have a good theatrical run, and we're very excited that we're having this opportunity. I mean, it's blowing me away because I wasn't expecting it. But as I was mentioning, the digital platforms for watching documentary films has really opened up this area, because in the past it was very difficult for most people to access a documentary film. They might see it on TV, perhaps. But now you can go up to Netflix and just search documentaries and say, oh, that's an interesting one. And you don't. I think part of it is that, you know, going to a theater, someone has to walk out of their house, get to the theater, find parking, pay, you know, £10 or whatever it is to get into the theater, sit down, watch it. If they don't like it, what are you going to do? But with Netflix, you know, you can just click on it and you start watching. You watch 5 or 10 minutes. You say, I don't like this. You go to another one. And you don't have to pay all that for it, right? Whereas, or you like it and you just watch it to the end and you tell your friend, hey, I just saw a great documentary. You know? So I think that it's the ease and convenience which is allowing for this sort of this almost not necessarily explosion, but certainly expansion of the documentary films. The other thing is that with digital cameras, it's become much cheaper. And so part of it is just that documentary films cost much less now to make than they used to, because in the past, like when I first started making films, it was film. Right? You had to buy the film stock, shoot it. You didn't know what you had, right? You had to wait for it to be processed. A few days later, you pick it up, you look at it, you go, oh no, that doesn't look good. That was out of focus. The lighting was bad, whatever. Now with digital, you can immediately get feedback. You see what the image is. If it's good, it's bad. Make adjustments, try again, or whatever. And then, just the cost is so much lower. You don't have to pay for the film, pay for the processing, all that. So it's much easier in some ways to make the documentary films today, and that allows for an expansion of it. Right? It's easy. More and more people can do it. It doesn't mean that more and more people are making good films. Right? Always just like you can get lots of cheap whiskey if you want, but if you want the quality, it still takes the time and the craft and the knowledge and the
skill, knowledge, and interest, absolute passion. And I think film festivals such as this one and the many that there are now, I mean, you're saying you're going to Ireland soon, and these are also places where these kind of films have a great life.
Right.
You can take them around the world, and there's interest in them.
Right, and then it gives, I mean, we say cinephiles, right, are usually the people who go to festivals. And it allows people who are interested in film to have, you know, access to many films that normally they would not be able to see.
Sure.
That's the thing, is that festivals bring in films that might never see a market in their home country. And so I think, festivals are a great place because, again, you get a variety, you get to see films that were unavailable otherwise. And a lot of festivals are interested in bringing in documentaries.
Yeah. So are you still kind of caught up in Scotch, the film rather than the drink, or have you got other projects that you're going to be working on next, or what's?
Well, I try not to stop, and so like I said, pre-production on the film was 6 months. We came to Scotland. We were here for 32 days. Most of those days were shooting, and then after that, we spent about 16 months in editing. And then after the editing was locked, then we did the sound editing and this final mix. And we were very fortunate to be able to get a special deal on the final mix. We did it at Skywalker Ranch.
Oh, wow.
That's George Lucas, Star Wars. And so that's his sound facility in Northern California.
Fantastic.
And then, again, I grew up in Northern California, so it was easy. I went and stayed with my mother, and every day I went over it was a 1 week long final mix, so it's totally professional, the highest quality, 5.1 surround, which is great. If you can go to the theater and see it, you get the full surround sound, which again is not available. Usually, documentaries don't usually bother making it because there's no point. But we were able to do that. So now that that's done, and again we're in the festival run, and this is the end of the festivals basically. I think today here in Glasgow, tomorrow in Dublin, and I believe that's probably the end of our festival run, because we are starting to go now into the market with the theaters and digital downloads and stuff. So after I did the Scotch film, actually the next summer, I shot another documentary in Taiwan, which is about some of the families, businesses who are on this very small island between Taiwan and China.
Okay.
And so that was more of a personal project. It's not meant to be like theatrical release or anything like that.
Okay.
It's very limited. And then we shot another film, which is and it's because that one was finished. That's all done. We finished that off a few months ago. And we've got this other one that we shot, which is just in this early stages of editing. But this covers more of a global problem. The title of the film is Vanishing Voices, and what it's looking at is the phenomena of small languages and cultures that are disappearing. They're simply being swallowed up by the majority languages. So, for example, in say South America, then you have all these tribal groups.
Sure.
But Spanish is the language, and so as Spanish is used more and more, then these tribal languages are slowly disappearing. The same is true. When we think about the United States, right? All the Native American tribes, almost none of them speak their native language anymore. They've just disappeared. They've vanished. And so what I did is the same thing is true in Taiwan, because when the mainland Chinese under Chiang Kai-shek came to Taiwan, they established Mandarin Chinese as the national language, and they forced all the schools to use Mandarin only. Right. So children were punished if they used their Aboriginal languages. And as a result, these languages have largely been wiped out. And so what we did is we went into one town and focused mostly on one family, talking about their history, say over the last 50 years of what it was like before and what it's like now, and using the sort of this microcosm to get a shot of the much greater global problem, because it's the same problem around the world. Sure. And so that's the film that we're working on right now.
That sounds fascinating.
And then the next film project, I already have a script. So those are documentaries, and now I'm moving away from documentary into narrative fiction. And there's a script that I've been working on for a long time. And we plan on, as soon as we get financing, we'll shoot it. But it's always a problem with financing. It's a small budget. It's a low budget film. It's only would be like $500,000. Yeah. Which for regular narrative film is very, very low budget.
Yeah. But it's still a lot of money to get.
But for me personally, I'm not just reaching into my piggy bank and pulling that money out.
Well, Andrew, thanks very much for talking to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me. It's nice to meet you, and I'd say hello to your many fans around the world.
Around the world, yeah. And we'll be back soon speaking to someone completely different. Cheers.